Perform an oil change. We're going to do a complete boat winterization on this Crownline 202. This boat is a 2000, so it's 25 years old, but not a lot has changed on the motor. This has a 5.7 liter V8 with throttle body fuel injection. So first step, I usually do this at the dock, and the reason I do it is just because I like doing it this way after I've taken it for a run and I get the oil really warm. So it's easy for me to draw it out through the dipstick, and that's why I do it here at the dock, and then I'll take it, put it on the trailer, and finish the rest of it. You can do it with the little earmuffs while it's all out dry docked. That's another way to do it, and I'll show you how those earmuffs work when we get to putting the coolant in the motor. But the first step is to get access to the motor, which includes pulling up the back part and then pulling the seat forward. This is an important step so you get good access to the engine. Alright, so in this next step what we need to do is to get a little pump like this one to extract the oil from the dipstick into your container, and it needs to be warm to do this, otherwise this pump isn't going to work. There are a lot of pumps. This is just one I've used. It's worked pretty reliably. It does a pretty quick job. And I'll show you once I get everything inserted into the dipstick and start the process. Alright, on this pump you can see that there's a direction where the oil is going to go this way. So on the real thin tube is going to go into the dipstick, and on the other side is going to go the thicker tube that's going to go into the refuse side where I'm going to dump the oil. Alright, here's your pump. I've connected the pump to across the battery. You got a red clip and a black one, so they're connected. The pump is hooked up. You'll see that this tube right here goes into your dipstick. I just pushed it down in there, and then as I turn the pump on, my goal is to make sure there's oil flowing through this pretty quickly, and I might have to adjust this tube by pushing it in and out to make sure I get good oil flow, which will be obvious. You'll see. Okay, here it goes. See how the oil's coming up? Going to the pump. I'm going to adjust it now. There you go. Pushing it down made it really start to draw. Now I want to look at the other end. Probably take about, I don't know, 10 minutes maybe. Now you're gonna see here it's starting to spurt like it's running out of oil. And that just means that the tube is no longer completely submerged in the oil. So we're getting close to the end. Now what I'll do is I'll actually move this up and down to see if I can, continue to get more oil. See if there's a good position for it where it draws more oil. But eventually, after I get done doing that, and I'm not getting any more oil, I move on to the next step. Alright, so now I'm pretty much done being able to suck the oil I can get out with the vacuum. So now I'm going to disconnect these tubes and blow them out and make sure there's oil is out of the tube so I can put it back in the box. Okay, and the next step This is the oil filter. And my recommendation on this, you'll notice that it's upside down, which means that it's going to leak once it starts. But my recommendation on this is to go slow. Just release it like I'm going to do with a standard oil wrench. And then just crack it. Take your time taking it off and let the oil drain back into the engine block the best that it can. It might not be 100%, but what you don't want to do is spin this off really quickly and then have that oil in the filter when it's upside down and be plooping all over the engine. So you'll see here, I'm just going to take my time. I'm going to let that thing drain down, hopefully. Doesn't always, but I found that when I take my time on things, they usually work out better. You could put some rags around this or a bag, but I'm going to see if I can do this successfully and to demonstrate. See, I can hear it actually draining right now. It's actually draining back. And now one more step I'm going to do, even though I've extracted the oil, is I'm going to drain what's left in the pan, and I'm going to show you that. So I'm going to get 100% of the oil out of this engine, including this little, quarter pint of oil that's in this oil filter. See? Take her slow. She's still going in. There you go. Success. Look at that. Now that will drain down, and I will be getting it on my next step. If not, you can just wipe out what's in there with a rag. But I didn't spill any. That's the important part. I didn't spill any. See how that's draining down? That's the goal. Let it go into the oil pan. Now the last step, before I put the new filter on, is I'm going to take this little cut off container, like a little juice container. Mine's a little flattened out because that's how I left it in storage. I didn't intend to do that, but I should still be okay. There was probably another, I don't know, half quart of oil that's in the engine. And the only way to get that out is to take a 15mm wrench, go underneath the motor, and extract it just like you would a car. Pull the plug, let it drain into this little container, and then very carefully fish that container out without spilling it and pour it into your refuse container. Now, when you take your boat to the marina, they probably don't make that step. They probably just extract the oil, and leave that half quart of oil in the motor, and they really don't have any ownership in it because they'll sell you a new engine if over time you need one. So anyway, I'm going to do this. I've always done it. I've been doing my own boat for 20 years now, and we're in Tennessee, so we do get freezing weather. So this is I got to make sure I do it right. All right, you can see how much oil. I would say there's probably a good half quart or better that I just got out of the motor. I spilled very little in the hull, which I will, when I pull the plug, contain that. Now, the other thing I'll tell you, a little pro tip here, is make sure you don't have any water in the hull of your boat, because that little container there is going to float around and make it more challenging for you to get it in the right place to collect the oil from the drain plug. Alright, the messiest part is done. Getting the oil out of the engine, and now we're going to fill it, but we're going to start first by putting the oil filter on. Now what you could do is dab this oil out there just to make sure you get rid of the last of the residue. Make sure that you have a good O-ring, and make sure the old O-ring isn't attached to the engine. There's nothing worse than trying to pressurize an engine with two O-rings on it. It makes a heck of a mess. So just watch for those. I've never seen it happen on my boat, but I've had it happen on my cars. Alright, we're going to start by putting this filter on. Make sure it's the oil filter and not the fuel filter. They look very similar. I don't know if they fit. I've never tried to put one in place of the other. And then what you do is you hand tighten this as tight as you can get it. and then you give it a quarter turn. And I don't recommend going more than that, just because this thing is on a kind of a flimsy bracket, and I think if you get it too tight, you could end up making it really hard to get it off without damaging something. So that's it, and that guy is on. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pour the oil into the open oil fill side. I put in the Mercruiser oil, which I'll show you. And I'm not going to show you how I'm pouring this in, but I am going to pour it in. I didn't bring my funnel, so I'm going to be very careful to pour it in that hole. This is the only oil I use. I use the Mercruiser 4-stroke 25W40 blend. I've even had marinas use straight 40 and all these other brands that are for cars. I don't do that. I just go with the synthetic mix that this is, and with what Mercruiser recommends. I just like to, make sure. I just feel like this is the best viscosity for a boat in the kind of weather that I'm in. Alright, I've got the oil full and I've got it to the top of the dipstick. Now the next thing I need to do is start the engine and fill the oil filter, because it's probably going to draw that down a little bit, and then I'll double check it and make sure it's full. The other thing is my boat is actually in the water, so this is a good way to check the oil, because this is how I want the oil level to be when the boat is running. Alright, the next step is we're going to change the fuel separating filter. I like to put some fuel in mine. I put gas, I put a little bit of seafoam in it, and I like to have it about 2/3 of the way full, because when I put it on the engine, I don't want to have to crank the motor over a lot from a fuel starve situation until it fills the fuel filter. So the fuel filter is right behind that white cover, which I'll show you next. Alright, here's the fuel filter on this boat, and you use the same wrench you used for the oil wrench. And I'm just going to take it off and replace it with the one that I've put 2/3 fuel in. Remember the old rule, righty tighty, lefty loosey? That's goes back to show you how old I am. But again, hand tight and a quarter turn. Really no more than that. Just don't want it to leak. And that's it. So now, last step in this part of the process is to put the fuel additive in, which I use seafoam, and I'll show you that. Okay, this is what I use. I like it. It works well. I put in, it's supposed to be 2 ounces per gallon. I don't have a lot of gas in this boat, so I'm probably going to go with about maybe 10 gallons worth of seafoam. So it'll be 20 ounces. That'd be it. And then when I drive the boat over to the boat ramp to take it out to finish the winterization, this will be completely circulated through the system. And we're going to pour this in the fuel tank. And this boat is now ready to be put back on the trailer, and from here we are going to do the lubrication, change the drive unit fluid, and then drain the water and fill it with antifreeze for the final winterization. Alright, boat's out of the water, plug pulled. I'm now going to drain the drive unit oil, and this actually takes more time than you think. It could take you a good hour, 45 minutes for all the fluid to drain, the 90 weight gear oil out of this drive unit. Now the other thing I want to point out is that one way to make it go faster, I found, is taking the lid off the overflow bottle. That way air can flow back through the system. It kind of vents it to allow it to drain faster. So I'm going to pull that plug. I'm going to use my trusty thickest flat blade screwdriver that I have, so I don't strip the little end plug. Okay, this is where it is. It's right here on the bottom of the drive unit. As you'll see, I'm going to take it off. And this drive unit, this boat's got about 1,200 hours on it, so it would not be unusual to find some shavings on the plug. There's this little magnet, and then you can see I've got some gunk on there. It's probably some shavings. So That's been going on for 10 years. This drive unit still is really solid. I wouldn't necessarily worry about it unless you start getting other contaminants in the oil. Now the other thing I would tell you is if you get like a milkshake looking fluid coming out of here, that means you got water in it. And that means there's a seal, and eventually you will destroy the drive unit. Not right away, but eventually. So anyway, this thing's going to have to sit for probably a good hour to drain all this out. And then you'll really be impressed with what it takes to put it back in. Okay, the next part of this procedure is we need to take this and start to take the 90 weight gear lube and feed it in through the bottom to force any of the air up through to the top of the drive unit. And so I am going to take this apart. It takes about 1.5 quarts. Hopefully I've got enough here. It's actually a couple things you want to do. One is, let's get the air out of the tube before I attach it to the drive case, which is where the drain plug came out. So I'm going to prime the pump here and get the 90 weight gear lube all the way to the end. And then I'm going to attach it to here. And this is just screwing it on like so until I get a nice tight seal and it doesn't leak. And uncoil this. I just like to do it that way to make sure this tube's full before I start. And now I just continue to pump until I go through this whole bottle and half of another one. And then how you know you're done is you go back to the overflow bottle, which I'll show you right here. That we talked about earlier. That overflow bottle, right in there, you want to fill this until you get to the add line and then stop for a bit. And the reason I say stop is because that oil has a way of expanding, and it'll keep flowing and filling that bottle and actually overfill it. So don't take it all the way to the top. Get it to the add line and then stop. Okay, so I am going to sit here for the next umpteen minutes and pump this thing full. Now you can see how the drive unit oil is starting to rise in the bottom of that overflow tube. So I'm actually starting to see it fill. So now I got to be careful not to overfill it. One added note of caution is when you're switching bottles, because one bottle's not enough, make sure that you do not introduce any more air into the system. Okay, now the next step to this process is now I've got to put this plug back in replace of the tube that I have in here. So I pretty much got my drive unit full, my overflow bottles to the add line. I'm going to just top it off when I get done. And then this is pretty messy right here because you got to pull this out. It's going to want to clunk all over the place. And then you got to just as quickly try to put the plug in without spilling it all out. So here we go. As you can see, alright, not the smoothest one I've done, but it's pretty good. Didn't lose too much. Alright, now there's a little like washer on there. It's not rubber, it's more of a gasket that you want to make sure you replace, or at least is in good condition if you're going to try to reuse it. I reused mine, it was in good shape. And then after that, we get our big screwdriver out, we tighten this baby back down, and I like a big flat blade, and be careful not to strip the head. In fact, I will raise it up a little bit and get a little tighter, but that's tight enough to illustrate what we're doing here. Now I'm going to pump out the leftover oil inside here, and we should be good to go for this part. So the drive unit is done, minus the fact I'm going to top it off on the top end just to get it to the add line after it settles. Okay, the next step is to drain all of the water out of the engine, and the way you're going to do that is, see this little petcock right here at the bottom of the water pump, this little blue like wing nut kind of thing? There's 6 of those on this engine because it has fuel injection. So there's one at the water pump, there's one on each side of the engine block, so on the underneath on both sides, and then there's one on each exhaust manifold on the bottom. So there's 4, this one's 5, and then because this boat is fuel injected, it's got a fuel injection cooling manifold that sits right down this side of the motor, and you have to really lay down on the floor, reach up underneath it, and take out the 6th plug. And then once, what you want to do is every one you take out, the water should come out. If not, maybe stick something up in there and make sure that that the water isn't just kind of trapped and that it comes out. Now, you're going to see how I do a belt and suspenders approach, just in case. But you know, you could really essentially drain your block, pour the coolant in, and probably be okay. But I like to run the coolant through with the engine running, just to make sure it gets in all the places. So you're going to see that here shortly. Alright, now it's time to drain the engine block. I'm going to pull all these plugs. Remember, there's 6 of them. Some of these would be really hard for me to show you on a camera, but I will do my best. And there is a little O-ring on the end of that plug. Make sure you don't lose it. Make sure this isn't cracked, because if these break or crack or leak, they're just going to fill your boat with water. So I'm going to set them right here so I can count all 6. Now remember, if your boat is carbureted, you might only have 5, because you're not going to have the one for the fuel injection cooler. So right here is one on the bottom of the exhaust manifold. This one's going to have more water than a water pump. The ones that have the most are the engine block ones, which are right here. Should have one right up under here. Hopefully you can see it. This one should really flush out some water. And again, if it doesn't, get a little screwdriver or something up there and make sure that the water is being released. There's nothing like some rust chunk or something blocking it. I'm going to go to the other side of the motor and do the same thing. Okay, there are all 6. You're going to notice though that I lost an O-ring on this one right here, which is for the port side engine block. So it's on the left side here if you're looking straight out the bow of the boat, and I am going to have to replace that. So I've got extras of these. I always keep them in case you have a cracked one, or like I just lost this O-ring. I double checked the fitting that it came from to make sure the O-ring's not stuck to it, and it's not. So it's probably in the hull of the boat somewhere, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace that one. Now what I'm going to do now is wait for this engine to quit leaking out and drain all that water out. This is the antifreeze that I use. I'm going to use 5 gallons, and I'm going to start off with pouring 2.5 gallons into the engine, and I'll show you through the hose that connects to the thermostat. I'm going to drain the engine, and I'm going to fill it with this manually by just pouring it in. So I buy my coolant from West Marine. I always buy propylene glycol. I do not buy the alcohol version, which is cheaper. That's really not good for your engine. This gives you the winterization capabilities that you need, along with the protection for your engine block, which is what you want. This big tank right here, you're going to see me use it later, but that's some leftover coolant from last year that we're going to pump in there. So I'm going to fill the block, and then I'm with the earmuffs, I'm going to start the engine and actually run coolant through the motor just as a belt and suspenders approach to make sure any place where the coolant didn't actually go from pouring it in, it's going to suck it in through the main suction system and make sure we cover all the bases. Okay, now that all the plugs are back and the engine is drained, I'm now going to remove this hose right here, the same one I remove every year, from the manifold that connects to the thermostat. So hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to pull that tube off. The reason I know it's the same hose because I've positioned the hose clamp so I can get to it easily from the top. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this funnel down there, and I'm going to proceed to put as many gallons of coolant in this motor. And this motor's been sitting for a while, so it's not really that hot. I always hate to pour cold liquid into a hot motor because you could ruin it. So this one's been sitting for a while, and this isn't like cold, this is room temperature. But I'm going to pour this in here until the water starts coming out the other side of that manifold where I disconnected the hose. It's not water, it's antifreeze. Stand corrected. Now what this is doing is it's going inside the engine and it's filling all those passages with coolant that's not going to freeze. And this is biodegradable, so when I go to flush this out in the spring, I don't have to recollect it. Although you'll see I do collect it when I'm finishing this up, and I reuse some of it just to prevent some waste. I have a big container in the back there. I'll collect what comes out the exhaust manifold when I'm doing the final procedure on it. So this will take about 2.5 gallons before it starts coming out this part right here. I don't know if you see it, I hope you do. So I keep an eye on that because when it comes spilling out I want to stop. Nope, it's not coming out yet. It's getting close. It's getting close. I start pouring this other one, it'll start coming out. These little foil tangs you get on the edge of these will be enough to spill all over the place when it catches one of those and flips it open. There it is. That's it. So it took a little over 2 gallons, and you can hear it. It's leaking right there, right where I took that hose off. Okay, so I'm going to hook this back up. And for the most part, this engine, if it didn't have that fuel injection cooler, has coolant in it pretty much everywhere. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put another couple gallons in this tank. I'm going to run that hose to the dog ears underneath the drive unit so it draws that coolant in. And then with my assistant, my wife, she is going to stand back there and make sure the coolant's going in the motor, and I'm going to start the engine. Now what that's going to do is it's going to suck the coolant into the motor, and eventually it will meet this other coolant I just poured into the engine and then start to spit it out the exhaust in the back. As it gets toward the end of that bottle, you know, I'll ask her, how close are you to the end of this bottle? As I'm standing there with the engine running, it'll be noisy. I'm going to then come up and pull this PCV hose, PCV valve, there it is, on the port side of the engine. I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to take fogging spray, and I'm going to start to just load the engine up with fogging spray at the end, probably last 30 seconds of runtime. And what that's going to do, the reason I use this particular hose is I really don't want to put the fogging spray through the throttle body. I want to put it under the throttle body. And this PCV valve is a vacuum under the throttle body. And it's going to, at the manifold level or at the bottom of the butterfly doors, and it's going to suck that in, coat the cylinders, last 30 seconds, then I'm going to kill the power, and that's it. Now when I go to start this in the spring, it's going to give a puff of blue smoke as it burns that off, but it's the way to protect the cylinder walls, and that's how I do it. I just pull that hose off the PCV valve, and there's enough vacuum, it just sucks it right in. Otherwise, you know, they tell you to take this off, and you have to disassemble this, and then you have to spray it through the top, which you can do. I mean, I just do it this way because I think it's just simpler and it's more effective. This is what I use for fogging oil. It's actual storage seal. So this is why I spray in that PCV valve line. So this is how we have this tank set up, where you got to keep that hose between the tank and above the place where the earmuffs are. And the earmuffs are right here. So in other words, if this hose was shorter, then I wouldn't worry about it. But if that hose drips below those earmuffs, it'll create an air pocket, and this fluid will not flow through the drive unit. So she's going to hold it just so the hose is in between, and you'll see that pink going through when I start the engine. It starts drawing it in. And then toward the end, I'm going to fog it. Okay, you ready?
Mm-hmm. Turn it on?
Yep, turn it on. Thank you. Here are the three grease zerks on the outdrive. You've got one right up here on the side of the transom, and then you've got the two pivot points where the drive unit goes up and down. So there's three grease zerks right there. There's a grease zerk that is on top of the sleeve that slides over that spline on the engine, which is, you have to pretty much